Hi, I'm Greg Schaefer, and welcome to the virtual CISO moment. Nick Lorizio joins us today. He is the co-founder and CEO of Astute. Nick, thank you so much for joining us today.
Greg, thank you so much for having me. I'm fired up after hearing that music intro.
Yeah, and even after the little false start there, it's like got to do things in order. Like I said, we're recording this on a Monday, and it's like I'm just not quite there in the work zone yet. So would love to hear about your history, your past, how you got involved in this wonderful field of technology, and what led you to eventually co-founding Astute.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for having me. So, I'll keep this short because I've touched on this a number of times, having the fortunate opportunity to be on a number of podcasts in recent times here. I went to college, right? I worked in construction and then I went to a private university in upstate New York. I focused immediately on business management and leadership, and I double majored in management information systems. Right. So I leave the double management out just to not sound too redundant. And during that journey, I actually, my senior year, I took a master's level course in cybersecurity. It was just really growing in popularity. I think, the CISO role wasn't even around. It's amazing how quickly things change and move in this space. And I found that to be pretty exciting. We did about one case study per week, and whether that was touching on physical security, the network, and employees, and access rights, and everything else, we dove in on about one per week, and that was a whole semester. That was about 12 weeks total, and it was a great experience. It got me excited about the topic. I did that, it was a 3-hour class once every Wednesday night, I think it was, and that got me excited about the topic. And I worked on a help desk my freshman year in university, and it was a great experience. However, I quickly learned that I was more fascinated on the business side of things, and I took a couple business internships throughout that process. Fell in love with being customer facing, learning about different economies and how businesses work and interact together. And I don't regret sitting on a help desk, but that was part of the learning experience. Like, you figure out what you like to do along the way. And having being a more technical person growing up my whole life, and being your grandparents, your parents always asking you for IT support help, right? And I quickly had the aptitude for doing that, and I spent a lot of time behind a computer screen as a kid. And coming out of my shell, I finally, I graduated college, and I took a job as a sales engineer for a local IT business that serviced the greater Boston area. And that was a fantastic experience. I worked for the owner. They had 20 to 30 employees at any given time. And we largely focused on the legal niche in greater Boston. So tremendous experience. I got to work directly with our distributors, our vendors. I was quoting out all the jobs. I was interacting with the sales guys. I was going on customer facing meetings and explaining the proposals and working up the pricing and quoting out all the jobs, and also got to interact with the engineering team as well. And you can imagine lawyers can be some of the most difficult and interesting people to work with. So they would nitpick all the contracts, and I'd have to do the back and forth and help with that. Working with non-technical sales folk. So that was a fantastic experience. And from there, I had an opportunity to jump ship and go over to the M&A space and work for a private equity backed MSP, which is one of the largest in the North America, if you will, or United States. And it was growing rapidly. There was about 4 to 5 acquisitions per year where they were purchasing companies of the size that I came from. And largely what I was doing there was I was focusing on converting their existing services to our preferred partners within our network, right? So it was fast paced. By the time I left there, I had 100 accounts generating 5 million a year in revenue for the business. Yeah. And they were all SMB. So, nothing over like 500-ish employees.
Mm-hmm.
And when we say SMB, and I'd love to touch on this, is, every company, as I kind of got into the enterprise sector, kind of defines an SMB a little bit differently, like whether it's size or vertical, right? So, I think that's an interesting thing to think about. And
Yeah.
and it was good. It was a great experience. You get beat up, and you can see how much the owners make in that circumstance, right? And I while I learned a lot and I was gaining experience, I felt like I reached a point where I wasn't, right? And I was reaching a point in my life where I wanted to start putting some money away. I wanted to start thinking about kids, so I hit a point where I was like, really, if I'm going to make this work, I either need to go work for a large enterprise, or I need to go off on my own and start my own IT business, right? And that's what I ultimately did. And then I went back and I worked in banking and finance, like yourself, for a little bit, because that was an area I was certainly didn't have the aptitude in. And I realized that the flow of money is so interconnected with cybersecurity,
Oh
um,
yeah.
and I became very fascinated. With
Sometimes not enough flows though. It's like sometimes we need more money to flow into cybersecurity. But
Yeah, and I that's right. And I listened to one of your recent episodes. I listened to two, actually, on my car ride the other day, and it talks about ROI. And ROI, is always, we always get beat up, whether you're in marketing, sales, finance, whatever it is the customer's going to ask is like, okay, how do I define that, right? And really, what I see, and I was thinking on this topic, is what I see is, I say, hey, if you're a client or a partner of mine, I want that shield. I want my logo, my brand, to be a value add. I want your customers, your clients, to feel that their credit card information, their banking information is safe, they're secure, because they have a trusted value added partner like Astute.
mhm.
And you should feel comfortable promoting that. And then, that's an added ROI in itself, to say, hey, that we're a protected business, just like you wouldn't work with a bank that wasn't regulated to some degree, right? That wasn't FDIC insured, that didn't
Right.
have report to the bureaus, right? So I'm not going to go to and that's a requirement that's federally regulated. Like, I'm not going to go bank with somebody who doesn't report to all three bureaus. I think that would be absurd.
Hmm.
So, and we look at something like Ticketmaster recently, which I had some influence on, is, they sent out an email to all their customers. I don't know if you use Ticketmaster, but I haven't seen a
Only when I
concert.
have to.
Right. And if you can avoid the fees, sure. Right. But maybe a friend has an extra ticket. So I it's been a couple of years since I think the last concert I went to was Chris Stapleton. It was great up in New Hampshire here. Um,
Mm.
but I still got an email, and it said, hey, report to your bureaus, freeze your credit card, do a credit freeze, because millions of consumer information have potentially been exposed to the dark web, which is fascinating, right? So I do see a big hole there, where the credit bureaus, with their customer support in Costa Rica, may not be the best person to handle a cyber incident, right? And if you could say that you have a trusted partner like Astute, um, I would feel much more comfortable doing business with that ticket provider than a Ticketmaster at this point. Especially with AI websites, fake websites, with the rise of ChatGPT, and the ease it is to create software, and the ease it is to create websites today. There's nothing stopping somebody from starting a Ticketmaster 2, or an alternative, that right before it was StubHub, Ticketmaster,
Hmm.
dominating the space, where you're going to have now the ability to create maybe 100 different ticket uh, distributors, and that's where, like, an Astute can come in and say, okay, sure, there's Ticketmaster or StubHub, but this reseller, this provider or vendor, leverages Astute to protect your consumer information.
So,
Um,
tell me a little bit more then about what Astute actually is doing. What do you guys do?
So that's the brand value add. But really, what we do is we source talent. So
Mm-hmm.
we would take a commission off the, hey, you need a CISO, right? And we're gonna, in this location, this locale, we're gonna get that service for you as well as any hardware and software and provide that. And work with our distributors, work with our vendors to get that project and coordinate that for you. So that's what Astute is.
Mm-hmm.
What I my long-term vision, right? And that still involves a lot of manual process, manual legwork. My long-term vision is that we're leveraging Astute Advisor, our in-house AI, more and more to automate that process so that a consumer can go in, like a CFO or another business can go in and say, I'm looking for X, Y, and Z. I'm looking for a VCISO service in Tennessee to do quarterly SIM reports or whatever it may be. And then we can go ahead and source that talent and then take a brokerage fee for that and then help regulate the market.
Well, you mentioned SMBs. I think that was an interesting point, and a good point is that everybody defines an SMB a little bit different. So I know in the United States, the Small Business Administration, they'll say small business is generally less than 500 employees, which to me, that's more like SMB. I always, from the virtual CISO side, I'll do the cutoff on employees at like 300 and like the revenue at 100 million, because after about that, you're typically looking at needing to get in a full-time CISO in order to, you just need one at that point in time. So I think you're right. I think defining what an SMB is kind of across the board, but regardless, from your perspective, having worked in the space and still continuing to work with providing resources, what are one or a couple of the most serious threats to SMBs out there from the InfoSec landscape?
Right. Well, I think especially as you get to the smaller SMBs, right? They don't have the resources on hand. They're not educated on the subject. It's fairly new, right? You know, it wasn't too long ago we were talking about disaster recovery and having a second,
Mm-hmm.
system somewhere else and geographically, right? So I think that it's new. I think there's a huge education hurdle for the SMB space. And as well as just, how am I, especially if you're in a fairly remote economy, how am I going to source the right cybersecurity professional where I might not have access to those resources? And it's just getting introduced to the community colleges and it's just getting introduced to the state schools and so forth. So, how am I going to source this talent pool? And that's where we really come in, is to help you navigate that process and that journey. Because it really doesn't make sense if you're sub 100 employees even to hire a CISO full time, right? And I think
Right.
right, and I think when cybersecurity, I mean, the first thing I sold was a freaking fax machine, right? So, right, so I think really the Gary Pica True Method vCISO, I think that he was a large driving force behind that methodology. Was, hey, why don't you take somebody who maybe has some technical account management experience, train him up on the cybersecurity space and how it's evolving, and then maybe give him 25 to 50 accounts depending on size and customer need, and have them kind of manage that and be responsible for it, right? And that was a huge I think driving force behind the creation of the vCISO and so on. Like when
Mm-hmm.
I worked for Thrive, it wasn't a mandatory requirement. It was more of like, hey, this is an extra service that we provide. Like, yes, you need the core 365, you need the core backups, and you need right email, and you need these sort of core functionalities to run your business. However, here's an added service that we provide. It's not required, but we provide it and we offer it.
What is from that perspective? I know um, the virtual CISO field has grown exponentially over the last several years, and for good reason, because it's helping to fill a need. Small businesses need that sort of executive information security risk management experience. But I've often said that bad advice is worse than no advice, and to take that a little bit further, a a bad virtual CISO can actually be worse to a small mid-sized business than no virtual CISO. So how do you guys vet, probably is the best word, to ensure that the resources, it could be virtual CISO or any other resource, that actually they are qualified to perform the duties?
Right, right. And certifications are one route. However, I prefer real world experience and deliverables over that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, long term vision is to have profiles set up where you can validate your credentials and so forth. But, and that's certainly one avenue to go down. However, I definitely value experience more so. Right. There's definitely going to be a phone call and an interview process that goes and before we vet these engineers. I've now working in the industry for over 10 years, I certainly have a network that I pull from, right,
Mm-hmm.
which is great. And really I have, the great part is well, it's not always the most cost effective, and I try not to bring cost as an issue when it comes to this topic. But I have great distributor networks where I can leverage, or vendors directly, I can leverage their resources, right? And they have the brand reputation behind them, right? If I work with a Tech Data, for instance, which is my preferred distributor, right? They have engineers in house. Whereas like as you grow to an MSP where you have a few hundred employees, you might want to bring more and more of those resources in house, right?
Mm-hmm.
At this size and scale that I'm at, a small team, I'm leveraging my distributors for the vast majority of their engineering talent in order to grow and scale, right? And that's just the reality of the business. Whereas I might pay a little bit more for their talent and resources than to use someone that's untrusted,
So what is a typical Astute client look like? What vertical or what size do you serve?
Yes, so we service all verticals across the board. Certainly the more regulatory ones we're avoiding as we're nimble. Yeah, so we don't have any healthcare clients at this stage.
Mm-hmm.
No banks at this stage, right? Fiserv, as you know, is tough to break down.
Mm-hmm.
But we've integrated ourselves in the circular economy of Portsmouth, New Hampshire, which you learn how these local economies operate and work over time. And there's a great SMB market right here. I've had some meetings with enterprises, what's called Fortune 1000, and we can certainly service that. However, the level that we do that is going to change dramatically, where we're more of like a vendor partner. We're negotiating with Dell directly. We're negotiating with Microsoft directly, and then still providing some type of service. However, it's not going to be as hands-on as some of these smaller customers that we service in our local economy here.
Awesome. Well, being both in charge of a company, founding a company, and being in this space, very stressful. I know that we have an issue in our field of problem of burnout. Part of it is because we've got the issue of the job market isn't exactly the best that it is right now, and as it's been before, although I think it is improving. But we need to do something to deal with that stress. We don't need to be on 24/7. It's not good for us. It's not good for the people that we're trying to serve. So what's one of the things that you do to, I like to use the word decompress, to get away from the stresses of both cyber technology and also of being an entrepreneur?
Oh my gosh. Well, look, I think you're a better performer at your job, at your responsibility, if you force yourself to take time and take it just as seriously as meeting with a customer. I force myself to focus on fitness. I value that tremendously.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I'm operating at a better capacity, especially with the ability to manage a crisis. Right. I mean, I've had a healthcare organization with 200 employees and 12 locations get hacked on a Sunday before, and the banks are closed and you can't send money. Right. So I've had to manage these, and I'm managing C-level or, VP talent in coordinating resources on an off hours, right? So I need to be prepared for when those incidents happen. I need to force myself to focus on fitness. I love to hike. I'm, super active. And I think that thinking with a clear head. And if you're not have a clear head, wait 24 hours and get back to it as soon as possible, because I think it's critical. And I love to golf if I can get out. I love to do that, and it's always, that can be stressful too. That could be if you're not playing.
Yeah, especially the way I golf. It's like I think I have to sign like liability waivers when I go out there, and it's actually been about 30 years since I've been on a golf course. Thankfully, there are just some things that some people aren't meant to do. But you mentioned hiking, and I actually just started to get into. I guess it would be considered a form of rucking. It's hiking, but using a weighted vest. So yesterday I was going through woods with a 50-pound vest on and climbing hills and this and that. And, I'm not exactly a young guy anymore. And it can be a little bit intense. So, but I'm learning how to do it. I agree with you, though. It's like, it's so important to be, anything you do physically wise, it just kind of like flushes out the system and keeps you on top of your game. So, future plans, what's coming down the road for Astute or for you or both?
Sure. So future plans is we're going to continue to look up market, right? And I think that it's going to be critical for us to land our first kind of mid-market client in order to really scale to that next phase that I'm looking to get into, right? And then, I really want to build out our R&D budget. I want to invest in local talent. I want to invest in our own software tools and resources to make the client experience better and improve that. So that's really on the table for the remainder of 2024, and really just kind of aggressively continue to push forward and smile and have that healthy balance in life that we just talked about.
And how can they get a hold of Astute? What's the website?
Oh, sure. So it's going to be Astute Technologist. That's plural, like the emoji with the guy with the little matrix background. So right. So it's going to be Astute Technologist, plural.com, as well as I'm on every social platform you could think of. So I have my Instagram, which is just Lorizio, first initial last name. I have LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I'm very active on TikTok now, right, to reach the younger audience. Seriously, I'm a millennial. However, there's now a whole new generation that is going to be looking for work soon. So I'm continuing to cater to all audiences and market as much as possible, and that makes the sales process easier, as I say, right? If I have all those resources out there that I can guide customers to, I feel that it makes my work easier.
Awesome. Well, Nick, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on today. I enjoyed hearing all about Astute and your path, and a lot of interesting things out there, and appreciate all that you're doing to help the community.
Thank you so much, Greg. It was a pleasure, and I hope to stay connected.
All right, and everybody, stay secure.